All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is James Klusaritz, and I'm a senior at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm also co-president of the Wharton Undergraduate Entrepreneurship Club. We call it WUEC, and WUEC is Penn's largest undergraduate entrepreneurship club, and our mission is simply to support aspiring and active entrepreneurs on Penn's campus. And we do this in a variety of ways, but in short, we immerse students in entrepreneurship through our various speaker events, tech treks, workshops, pitch competitions, and we also help founders grow their startups by connecting them with mentors and other resources. So I've been in WUEC now for 4 years, and we have grown tremendously during this time, just in our overall size, the speakers we can bring on, the amount of money we can give away, and it really goes without saying that this growth has been solely attributable to the people that make up our club. So specifically, it has been the drive of our leadership and of our board members that has really ignited this charge. So today I would just like to briefly talk about that drive and motivation. I want to discuss my experiences in WUEC and explain how one might maximize the potential of a student group through the maximization of motivation more generally. So how can a leader or a member of a student group seek to motivate those around them? What truly drives people? How can we demystify this and implement that understanding into our organizations? While I will mostly be talking about this in the context of student groups, I think the ideas I'm presenting are likely applicable to other organizational types. So yeah, with that being said, I just want to first start off with a discussion of some psychological foundations for motivation, and then sort of zoom out and discuss my views regarding how to effectively build these into an organization structure. So yeah, beginning with a discussion of human psychology, the first thing I want to talk about, and what's arguably most important, is the role of meaning in one's will to do something. So the first step into motivating anyone is to figure out what they want. And at the end of the day, and from a really broad abstract level, we can really understand any want or desire for something as merely a means to an end. And in my opinion, that sort of ultimate end is frequently meaning. People do things, commit to things, pursue large goals because they believe that, in the long run, those things will give them meaning. At the end of the day, we are creatures of pride, and so we pursue things that fulfill that appetite for purpose and fulfillment and meaning. Obviously, we are dealing with highly abstract concepts here, so I think for now, I just think it is important to understand that you will never be able to sustainably motivate someone without aligning their sense of meaning with your team or organization's missions and functions. So yeah, the second thing I want to talk about with regard to psychological motivators is the importance of positive reinforcement. And this is very much connected to what I just discussed about meaning as well. I think everyone understands what positive reinforcement is, but as I recently learned in my psychology class, the more technical definition of this, of positive reinforcement, is the reception of a positive stimulus after a correct behavior. In more practical terms, this simply means giving credit where credit is due. It means paying attention to not just your own actions, but those of everyone else around you. Again, people are frequently motivated by pride and a desire for meaning. And just from my personal opinion, you could be working on the most fulfilling, difficult project ever, but still really lack that sense of motivation if nobody recognizes you. And this, of course, is not a novel idea by any means. Time and time again, it has been empirically shown that people are far more likely to be effective when they're rewarded for their good efforts instead of being reprimanded for their shortcomings. People want to be recognized, and I think key to this is simply authentic recognition. We are much better critics than we are actors, and it is very obvious to identify instances of false appreciation. This means, especially as a leader, that we must constantly reflect on the actions of those around us and think of genuine compliments that really come from the heart. This is so minor, but I think it's actually really significant. I can't tell you how many times while working within WUEC that I've witnessed someone start off as an all-star member and slowly sort of lose their drive in those cases where they have not been properly recognized with that positive reinforcement. Now the last thing I want to talk about on the psychological end is the fact that motivation is highly contagious. In fact, all emotions are very contagious. A popular concept in the realm of micro-sociology is this idea of a social context. In any social setting, professional or casual, there is a social context or energy that is created by those who make up that setting. And although this may seem obvious, we have to be hyper aware of how our energy contributes to the overall social context in any given setting. Getting back to the point here, enthusiasm, creativity, motivation are all things that are highly contagious and can be maximized in the right atmosphere. This means that when the energy of your team is down, you have to find it in yourself to pick it up through your words, through your actions, and so forth. So if the motivation in your team is lacking, especially if you're a leader, it is your job to reignite that fire. And if you do it right, those around you will take notice and add to it in somewhat of a positive feedback loop. I think unlike in the case of feigned appreciation, you don't have to worry too much about your energy being contrived. Even if your members recognize it as such, they will still be motivated by your effort to lift them up. Right, so we've talked about meaning, recognition, and contagion as important contributors in the realm of psychological motivation. So I want now to take the remaining time to discuss how one might incorporate these as building blocks of a student organization. My views on organizational motivation can roughly be broken down into three groups, so recruiting, culture, and operations. From the get-go, we want to make sure that we are attracting and working with members who have the right kind of motivation. And from there, once they're on our team, we must provide them with the optimal culture and work functions to maximize that potential. So the first step to properly recruiting or attracting the right team members is to, I think, holistically and authentically communicate the expectations of their role. When advertising your club or when looking for co-founders or anything of the like, it is actually really tempting to do the exact opposite of what I just said. So you want to encourage people to join you, and while it's great to wield your passion as a means for persuasion, you must do so honestly. Anything else will, I think, hurt you in the long run. If someone's motivation or desire to join your team is misinformed, you can trust that when they actually join you, they will become informed, and after joining, it's likely that this process will negatively change their level of commitment. And on a very related note, and still on the topic of recruiting, you want to look for team members who have the correct motivation. As I said before, it is my opinion that the real end of all wills is meaning. However, I think it's wise to discriminate on the means people may employ to these ends. Less abstractly, I just mean that you want to make sure people are deriving this meaning in the right way. So, are your prospective teammates really driven by the objective of your organization, or are they merely motivated by some, say, selfish means, such as a resume bullet or simply vanity? Ideally, these true intentions will be discovered during your due diligence and through recruiting, but it's just vital that you keep that in the back of your mind. Right, so now I'm going to transition into some cultural considerations for motivation. Once you have your team, you need to provide a good atmosphere for them to thrive. In line with what I spoke about before with regard to positive reinforcement, This frequently means making sure everyone is recognized. The first step here, in my opinion, is to make sure you are getting to know everyone on your team or in your student group. A big part of feeling that you hold a meaningful role within a team is simply feeling that people know you. This will not only bolster everyone's individual sense of obligation to the group, but it will also keep them coming back to foster and continue these new friendships. From an organization perspective, this simply means scheduling lunches, coffee chats, socials with your members. Get to know who they are, get to know their names, what they want to do, where they are from, and so forth. And I think a second important element here is just keeping your culture casual. Nobody wants to work in a group that takes themselves too seriously. Nobody wants to work with people they feel that they only know on a surface level. It is, again, in my opinion, it's the role of the leader to implement this sort of informality into the social context of any student group. I imagine that in professional settings, this may be more difficult to implement, but at least within the context of student groups, really just keep a light heart. We're all students at the end of the day. We're all equals. I think it's definitely okay to show your goofy side when you can, and don't let any leadership or president position go to your head, because at the end of the day, it ain't worth much. Right. So finally, I want to discuss some operational ways to maximize motivation within student groups. Meaning, how can we effectively set up sub-teams and functions within a group? My first thought, especially for leaders, would simply be to have a vision. So growth becomes increasingly difficult as a team matures. And as such, every leader should really question the decisions of past generations, seek to fix aspects of the organization that are and aren't broken, and work together with members to really form a vision of the club's future. I think this also requires just the effective communication of that vision. A leader must effectively break down barriers between sub-teams within an organization and ensure just a unified front. And then from there, you have to find ways to make your pursuit of this mission a fun process. So any organization, student or otherwise, can accomplish their mission through a million different routes. And it is important that you find those routes that are most interesting, that are most interactive, that will best lend themselves to that aforementioned sense of meaning. How can you turn something typically arduous into something that is now fun and creative? How can you leverage the known interests of your teammates into the functions you give them? And I think on a very related note, you want to make sure everyone has a voice in this process. It is really hard to balance structure with idea generation. And so you have to be very intentional to limit those negative aspects of bureaucracy within your group. Really, brainstorming is the best part of any strategic process. Everyone has ideas, so encourage that they be spoken and that they be heard. Right, and the very last thing on this topic of operations I want to mention is that it is vital that any leader step up. As I mentioned before, motivation is highly contagious and it comes from the top. There is nothing more discouraging than a leader who does not back up his or her words with action. So if you are the leader of a group, no one should be working harder than you, in my opinion, and I think this is really at the end of the day what you signed up for. Nice. So that's everything I had to say. Throughout this talk, I've tried to stray away from anything too prescriptive, as everyone's team and leadership role is going to be very different. I think it's more helpful to provide ideas that can serve as just the foundation for your own leadership prescriptions. But at the end of the day, I hope my ideas offer a new perspective of how to really think about team motivation. A key part of improvement is merely reflection. So I recommend that you always take time to reflect on your actions, and constantly make sure that your actions are in alignment with your team's overall mission. The last thing I'll say is, if anyone would like to talk with me, pitch me a startup idea, or just throw ideas off me, feel free to reach out. My email is jjklu@sas.upenn.edu. Thank you guys so much again for having me. It's been wonderful.